people see in our conversation that we're just like them. The challenges that they face, we face. And we don't always handle it correctly. And with that being said, you don't stop being sons and daughters of God. You don't stop being spiritual. Some of us think that if, I'm going to truly be spiritual, then I'm going to go off to myself. I'm going to go into a monastery. But true spirituality shows up when you're interacting with others. True spirituality shows up when the kids come home and they're fighting. True spirituality shows up when you have that fender bender and you don't know what to do at that moment. True spirituality happens when we're interacting with others, not when we're by ourselves. By ourselves is it's the catalyst. It begins the process. It gets us ready to interact with others. But far too many of us, we think that if I truly want to be spiritual, then I'm going to go away, I'm going to find this quiet place, and I'm going to leave the world alone. But see, it's easy to be spiritual when you're by yourself. It's harder to be spiritual when you're interacting with your fellow man.
You can say that again. I'm always reaching for my sword.
I thought that was only me.
No. Sometimes people are really aggravating.
Absolutely. And I've hacked off a couple of ears, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, that would have been me years ago. In fact, I was. So that's it. Knowing that, though, you see, having experienced it, then you know what they're going through.
Absolutely.
And that's why we're here. We're trying to relieve them of that going through.
Absolutely.
So that's what this is all about. It's relieving them from that going through, because they go through it according to their attitudes. And I tell you, you have attitudes that you have not yet confessed to yourself.
I agree.
That self-examination is really a nice tool, and you should use it. And all that self-examination is just listening to what you're saying to yourself, what you're suggesting to yourself. That's all it is. And if you just do those two things properly, honestly, it'll all open up for you. Believe me, it really will. Think about it.
I was talking about hacking off the ear, and I want to give the metaphysical equivalent of hacking off the ear. That's me telling somebody off. Me, whether it be by way of text, by way of verbal conversation. When I get into the spirit of Peter, and it's like Peter telling Jesus, Lord, no, forbid, you shouldn't be crucified. They're not going to take you. And he says, get thee behind me, Peter. Sometimes I act as Peter, and I will sometimes hack off an ear, like I said, by way of my words, and those words can be verbally, they can be in a message, and I have to be mindful. So sometimes I have to, as Lindell just stated, get quiet first before and see what is really being said. And one thing that I find with instant messaging, text messaging, emails, and so forth, things get lost in translation. And, Linda and I can have a verbal conversation and things can be lost in translation, but how much more when somebody sends you a message and you think that you understand what the message is saying, and you're really off point of what is really being said because you can't hear how the person's tonality is. You can't see their facial expressions. So because of that, I sometimes dislike instant messaging. I sometimes dislike emails or texts because things get lost in translation, and what you think the person was conveying is far from what they were conveying. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I know. It's like, I tell people, look, I'm not here to hurt anybody's feelings or to judge anybody, because especially not me. So don't take offense to anything that I say. Sometimes the old sailor comes out. So it's hard to keep him subdued while the message comes through sometimes.
And so what you have is a sailor and a Marine. If I say something that may seem strong to some of you, or if I use a word that may not convey what it truly is that I'm saying, I apologize ahead of time. That's not my intent. My intent in doing what I do is always to come across from a place of love. But like I said, that's not always conveyed.
And do it with humor.
And with humor, absolutely, absolutely. I think that we don't laugh enough, and I mean in general. I think that sometimes with people we've gotten so serious, with the events in the world, and even when it wasn't this thing and it was the other thing, whatever. I think that we're too serious, and I think that we think that being hypersensitive and serious is a true sign of spirituality. But I'd like to believe that the great masters like Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, I like to believe that they had a sense of humor and that they laughed.
Well, I think they did. I think from what I've read, I think they did. Today, now you couldn't tell anybody's expression.
Absolutely.
So that might be a lot of problem, too.
Well, what many of us try to do, and I know that you're not doing it, but they have something called emojis. And emojis, what they allow you to do is send facial expressions. So like if a person is laughing, they'll send a laughing, happy face. If they're sad, they'll send a sad face. And so that helps sometimes, but even with that, like you said, because of how information is being conveyed, it's really hard to tell what a person is feeling at any given time. So like I said, our goal is to come across...
Don't judge by appearances.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm sure that was part of that, too.
Absolutely. As we're looking forward to just moving forward with life as life goes on, as creators, what I want to challenge each and every one of you to do is begin to decide, cut off all those other stuff, but decide who it is that you want to be. Because, see, most of us think that we have far more time than we do. And even if we live another 50 years for many of us, or even 75 years for some of us, it's still a very short period of time. So who do you want to be? What legacy do you want to leave behind? Because the truth of the matter is, as Lindell's probably getting ready to say here shortly, is you're leaving it one way or the other. So what I'm asking you to do is become more conscious of who you want to be around your family, who you want to be around your friends, what impact you want to make, because you're doing it because you're on automatic. I'm just asking you to be more conscious of your doing. Do you have anything to add?
No, that's it. That's it. Consciousness. That's what you are. You're consciousness. But are you guiding it, or are you being guided by your environment? You see, that's what the problem is that most people are guided by their environment rather than themselves. And so they face all the problems that the mass mind reasoning would face. But you can back off from that. You are given to choose this day. And if you do so, actually you are doing so, but because it's not a request in the first place, it's telling you that that's what you are doing. You have been given, choose this day. If you do so purposely, you'll be happy. If you do so unpurposely, well, then you suffer the consequences. We're told by God himself that only God suffers. And someone says, well, I am suffering, and that's his name. I am. He's with you always, will never leave you, omnipresence. If you get that, what else do you need to know? He's with you always. Just turn to him, and he'll turn to you. And that's what it is with all of this forgiveness thing. You want to be forgiven, forgive. That's it. That's who you're forgiving. You're forgiving yourself. Because you're forgiving them because they don't know, and at the same time, you're forgiving yourself because you don't know. And also, you're told to forgive yourself 70 times 7. And like I said, I use my quota up every day. So I'm sure most of us do.
We're just unaware of what we do. And speaking of the 70 times 7, that's with anything. When you make that decision of who it is that you want to be, forgive yourself when you don't feel like you're acting in accordance with your higher ideal of yourself. Keep doing it until it becomes natural for you. That's how any change is made. Change is made by a forgiveness of the old and a replacing it with the new. Some people call that repentance. So when you take on a new concept, a new ideal, say that you want to lose weight, have a better relationship, then you start operating out of that 70 times 7. And that doesn't mean you stop once you get to 490. That's not what that means. That means indefinite.
Isn't that where all that comes from? You're always feeding yourself mentally. You're feeding yourself physically all the time. And let me tell you this. Your body takes its marching orders from your attitudes, your assumptions, your moods. So if they're not lovely and of good report, look out. Because that's where it all comes from. You're just not paying attention to what you're thinking about. I mean, really, that is so important to really know what you're thinking, because you do so much thinking when you're not really aware that you're thinking, and you could be undoing everything you're doing when you are thinking and paying attention.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did that come out right?
It came out perfect. And it's funny that you brought up about the body and the medicine cabinet.
Yeah.
We said it before. You're spiritual beings having a human experience. In other words, your energy system. Scientists have looked at water. Now, we're just talking about water. Now, understand, we're made up of at least 70% water. But scientists have looked at water, and what they've sent to water, and they've done it with plants as well, but we're talking about water, and they've sent negative thought vibrations, a negative train of thought. Maybe, I hate you, I don't love you anymore, whatever that thought was, and they looked at water under a telescope, and it was distorted and it was ugly. Then they sent positive, loving thoughts to the water. And what they found was that it looked like a beautiful rainbow, snowflakes, and the patterns were so beautiful. This is water. Now, can you imagine a body, a system like yours, that's holding a thought of unforgiveness? What do you think that's happening inside that body? And that's why we see people who are outwardly relatively healthy. They're stricken with something like cancer. And we wonder how that person gets ill. But because they've allowed so much poison through negative thoughts, you might as well be taking a bottle of poison and drinking it than to hold a thought of unforgiveness, because it's the same equivalent.
Well, actually, you got to think about resentment too. You know, resentment is a killer, but it's a killer of the person who's resentful.
Absolutely.
So you want to remember that and that's part of unforgiveness is resentment. It's hard to forgive somebody if you're resenting them.
Absolutely.
So you got to get rid of the resentment first. I can't even pronounce the word right.
That tells me you don't hold resentment.
Actually, it's kind of heavy.
It's very heavy.
Really, it is. I mean, when you think about it, because actually it distorts everything. If you're really resentful, it distorts everything in your life to some degree.
It weighs down your spirit. Yeah.
Right. I mean, well, we just get bombarded from without with all kinds of unnecessary nonsense. But that's what it means when you're to contemplate. You listen, you get information, and you contemplate it. It means you take it apart and you find out, because you're seeking. and seek, and you shall find.